They conquered worlds with ease, until a human warship appeared. The last city on Orvith IV stopped burning at dawn. Not because the Cathari showed mercy. They never did. It stopped burning because there was nothing left to burn. The towers were powder. The fields were glass. 3 billion Marathi had lived on that world for 11,000 years, built music and medicine and careful, beautiful things. And in 6 hours, the Cathari Dominion had reduced all of it to a number in a report. Admiral Rodden stood at the observation deck of his flagship, the Iron Verdict, and looked at the dead planet below. He felt nothing in particular. That was not cruelty. It was simply efficiency. Feelings slowed decisions, and slow decisions lost wars. The Dominion had not lost a war in 240 years. "Final count," he said. Subcommander Yavel read from his tablet without looking up. 219 enemy vessels destroyed. 4 escaped. Civilian population eliminated. Resource extraction teams will begin landing at first cycle. 4 escaped, Rodden repeated. Civilian transports, long-range, minimal threat. Rodden said nothing more about it. 4 ships carrying terrified survivors was not a strategic problem. It was noise. The galaxy was full of noise. Fleet Analyst Suri sat at her station near the back of the command deck. She was young for her rank, quiet in the way that made senior officers either trust her completely or forget she existed. Right now she was doing neither. She was reading, pulling records from every database the Dominion had cataloged in the outer spiral arm, cross-referencing the escaped ships' projected trajectories with known inhabited systems. One designation kept appearing in the gaps. She flagged it, stared at it, flagged it again. "Admiral," she said, "I want to show you something." Rodden turned slowly. He disliked being interrupted during post-conquest review. Suri knew this. The fact that she spoke anyway made him walk over. She pulled up a star map. Most of it was familiar Dominion-controlled space in gold, neutral systems in gray, contested zones in red. But in the lower right quadrant, past the edge of the Dominion's current reach, there was a cluster of systems marked in a pale, almost apologetic blue. No flag, no formal alliance designation, just a label that had been entered into the Galactic Registry 40 years ago by a survey drone and never updated. Human space uncontacted, technological status unknown, population estimates incomplete. "What is this?" Rodden asked. "A species," Suri said, "called humans. They appear in the records 3 times, once in a trade dispute 200 years ago, once in a brief contact report from the Velori, and once in a biological survey. The Velori described them as," she scrolled, "aggressive when threatened but generally reclusive, limited interstellar presence at the time of contact." Limited presence, unknown technology. Rodden straightened. "So a primitive species sitting on the edge of our next expansion corridor." "Possibly. But the 4 ships that escaped Orvith IV, their projected path takes them directly toward that region." Yavel crossed his arms. "Survivors running to hide behind primitives. They are desperate." "Or they know something we don't," Suri said quietly. The 2 senior officers looked at her. She kept her expression neutral. "I would like to request more time to research this before we move on Tesvan," she said. Rodden had already turned back to the window. "Request denied. We move on schedule. Tesvan in 9 days." Suri looked back at her screen. She did not argue. She was not the type to argue. Instead, she opened a new file and began collecting everything she could find on humans, their conflicts, their history, their weapons, their wars. There was not much in the database. That bothered her more than she could explain. A species with an interstellar presence, even a small one, that had never sought contact with the Dominion, never sent diplomats, never responded to the expansion of gold across the star map creeping steadily toward their territory. Either they did not know, or they did not feel the need to respond. Surrey was not sure which of those possibilities was more unsettling. Below the iron verdict, automated Kethari landers descended into the wreckage of Orvith IV, beginning the long mechanical work of extracting whatever value remained. Somewhere in the outer dark, 4 small ships burned hard on emergency drives, carrying the last of the Marathi toward a pale blue cluster of stars they had heard about only in trade whispers. A cluster where, they had been told, the species called humans did not surrender easily. One of the Marathi pilots activated the ship's long-range distress beacon. It was a simple signal, no message, no plea. Just a location, a timestamp, and a code that translated across most galactic communication standards as "Survivors incoming, hostile force behind us." The beacon pushed outward at light speed, silent and invisible, through the nothing between stars. It would reach a human relay station in 11 days. The response, when it came, would not be what the Kethari expected. It never was with humans. Surrey would learn that soon enough. For now, the iron verdict held orbit over its latest grave, and Admiral Rodden planned his next conquest with the quiet confidence of a commander who had never once been wrong about what was coming. He had no reason to think this time would be different. That was, Surrey thought, reading silently at her station, the most dangerous thing about him. They conquered worlds with ease, until a human warship appeared. The signal came in pieces. Not because it was damaged, though it was, slightly, worn thin by 11 days of travel through deep space. It came in pieces because the people listening to it kept stopping the playback. They kept stopping it because what it contained was difficult to sit with. The relay station above Luna logged it first. An automated system flagged it, passed it to a duty officer, who passed it to a senior analyst, who passed it to a general, who passed it to a council chamber on Earth where 17 people sat around a long table and watched the last hours of Orvith IV play out on a screen. Nobody spoke for a long time after it ended. Counselor Weth was the first. He was not a military man. He managed resource allocation for 4 outer colonies, had never served, and had the kind of careful face that made people trust him with budgets. He looked at the screen after the footage ended and said, "We cannot wait." Admiral Petra Vane sat at the far end of the table. She was 61 years old, had commanded 3 different ships before moving to a fleet post, and had the quality, rare in rooms like this, of never speaking until she had something worth saying. She had been quiet through the whole playback. She stayed quiet a moment longer. Then she asked one question. How long until their expansion corridor reaches Hessa Colony? The analyst at the side table checked his numbers twice. At current pace, approximately 4 months. Petra nodded once. That was all she needed. The debate that followed lasted 2 hours. Some council members wanted to send diplomats first. Others wanted to build a coalition with neighboring species. One man argued that humans had no obligation to intervene in a conflict that had not yet touched them. These were not foolish positions. Petra understood each one. She waited while they talked. When it was her turn, she did not give a speech. She said, "The Kethari do not respond to diplomats. They have received 17 formal communications from the species they've since eliminated. The Marathi sent 3 themselves." She paused. "What they respond to is force, or the credible promise of it. We can build a coalition in 8 months. We have 4. I am asking for 1 ship and authorization to move it to the Tesven corridor, not to start a war, but to show them that the next system on their list has something different waiting." 1 ship, Counselor Weth repeated, not arguing, confirming. "1 ship first," Petra said. "If it goes the way I expect, we will need more. But 1 ship goes now, and it goes fast, and it makes clear that we are paying attention." The vote was 11-6. Petra Vane left the chamber before anyone could add qualifications. The UES Resolute was already fueled. Captain Aran Dast had commanded the Resolute for 3 years. Before that, 2 other ships. Before that, spent 12 years as a tactical officer learning the particular discipline of staying composed when everything around you was trying very hard to kill you. He was not a dramatic man. He did not make speeches about glory or history or the weight of the moment. When Petra Vane's orders came through and he called his crew to the main deck, he stood in front of 412 people and said the following: "We are going to the Tesven system. There is a Kethari fleet there, or there will be by the time we arrive. Our job is to make them understand that engaging further in this corridor has a cost they have not yet calculated. We do our jobs. We look after each other. Any questions?" There were none. Oran Dast was the kind of commander whose crew did not need to ask questions because he answered them before they formed. The Resolute left dock at 400 and jumped within the hour. One warship, moving alone, pushing hard toward a system where a pacifist civilization called the Tesven were about to become the Kethari Dominion's next entry in a long list of things they had destroyed without consequence. In the bunk room 2 decks below the bridge, Lieutenant Nira Sabal reviewed targeting profiles for Kethari destroyer-class vessels. She had been doing it for 6 days. Since the signal first came through, running numbers, building firing solutions, learning their patterns from the Orvith IV footage the way a student learns from a textbook. She had filled 4 digital notebooks. She was calm in the way that people who are very good at dangerous things are calm, not unaware, not unconcerned, just ready. The Resolute crossed into the outer reach of the Tesven corridor at the end of the 3rd day. Sensors picked up residual energy signatures, Kethari drives, the specific frequency of their jump technology, still warm in the dark. They were close. Oran Das stood at the front of the bridge and looked at the data on his screen. He did not look worried. He looked the way a man looks when he has prepared for something as well as it is possible to prepare, and now it is time to find out if that is enough. He said, "Take us in, standard approach, no stealth, I want them to see us coming." The Resolute moved forward. One ship. Into the dark. They conquered worlds with ease, until a human warship appeared. The Tesven had no military. This was not a failure of imagination or courage. It was a philosophical position, held for 600 years, written into their founding documents and taught to every child, that the construction of weapons was an admission of fear, and the Tesven had chosen, long ago, not to be afraid. It had worked. Their neighbors were peaceful. Their trade was good. Their history, compared to most species in the galaxy, was remarkably quiet. They had no answer for the Kethari. By the time the Iron Verdict and its 200 ships dropped into the Tesven system, the planet's leadership had already sent 4 messages of surrender. The Kethari did not respond to surrender messages. Surrender implied there had been resistance. The Dominion did not accept resistance. It simply continued until the resistance was gone, and since the Tesven offered none, the fleet moved into bombardment position with the mechanical indifference of a machine doing the task it was built for. On the surface, people ran, not because running would help, because the body does what the body does. Admiral Rodden gave the order to begin the first bombardment sequence. The order never executed. Every sensor on the Iron Verdict screamed at once. A contact had appeared at the edge of the system. One ship. It had not crept in from a blind angle or used any kind of masking technology. It had simply come out of faster-than-light travel in a direct line, at a speed that suggested it had pushed its drives hard to get here, and it was now holding position 60,000 kilometers from the outer edge of the Kethari formation. It did not fire, it did not maneuver. It sat in space and ran a full active scan of the entire fleet, not subtle, not hidden. Broadcasting. Here I am looking at you, I see everything. Yavel stared at his screen. One vessel. Mass and energy profile suggest a heavy warship class, but we have no matching configuration in our database. Surrey was already pulling records. Human. It had to be, the trajectory matched, The timing matched. She felt something cold move through her that she did not have a name for. Rodden opened a fleet-wide channel to the newcomer. Unidentified vessel. You have entered an active Dominion operation. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. The response took 40 seconds. Rodden assumed this was fear or a translation delay or both. It was neither. When the voice came through, it was level, not aggressive, not pleading. Simply a person speaking clearly, the way someone speaks when they have thought carefully about every word before saying it. This is Captain Oran Dast of the United Earth ship Resolute. You are conducting an unprovoked military assault on a non-combatant civilization. The Tesven have offered no resistance and pose no threat. You will cease bombardment operations and withdraw your fleet from this system within 1 hour. This is not a request, and it is not the opening of a negotiation. It is an instruction. Resolute out. The channel closed. The bridge of the Iron Verdict was quiet for a moment. Then Yavel said, "One ship." "One ship," Rodden agreed. Something in his voice was almost amused. He had not been amused in some time. There was something almost refreshing about audacity this complete. "Send destroyers. 12 should be more than sufficient. Make it fast, I don't want the Tesven to think delay means hope." 12 Kethari destroyers broke from the formation and accelerated toward the Resolute. The human ship watched them come, still not moving, still scanning. When the destroyers reached 40,000 kilometers, Oran Dast opened the channel again. "I see you've sent 12 ships," he said. "I want you to watch this carefully, Admiral, because I am going to show you something, and I want you to understand it before you make your next decision." Rodden frowned. He did not like the phrasing. It sounded like a teacher preparing a lesson. The Resolute moved. Not away, toward them. It accelerated directly into the formation of 12 destroyers at a speed that Surrey's instruments clocked as 40% faster than anything the Dominion had fielded in the destroyer class. And it was not moving in a straight line. It jinked, rolled, cut angles that looked almost random but were not, because every movement shifted it out of the optimum firing solution of the next ship, in sequence before that ship had even completed its targeting lock. Nira Sabal called her shots in a flat, quiet voice that the Dominion sensors picked up as background transmission. She did not shout. She did not hesitate. She spoke the way someone speaks when they have done a thing so many times in practice that doing it for real feels like the same thing. 3 destroyers lost engine function inside 90 seconds. 1 broke apart at the rear drive section. 2 pulled hard to avoid a collision and clipped each other, both spinning off damaged. The remaining 6 tried to surround the Resolute. It went straight through the gap between 2 of them, fired twice going through, came out the other side with hulls scoring along the port quarter, and 2 more Kethari ships venting atmosphere. The engagement had lasted 4 minutes. 4 of 12 Kethari destroyers were combat effective. The rest were dead, dying, or drifting. The Resolute held position again, 60,000 kilometers out, same spot it had started. Rodden had not moved. He was looking at the display. He was doing the calculation that every commander does when something has not gone the way it was supposed to go, looking for the variable he had missed. Surrey was looking at the transmission logs. The Resolute had been broadcasting on a secondary channel the entire time. Not to Earth. To something closer. They conquered worlds with ease, until a human warship appeared. Surrey pulled the secondary transmission apart layer by layer. It was encrypted, but the encryption was not designed to hide the signal's existence, only its contents. The Resolute wanted the Dominion to know it was transmitting. That was deliberate. That was a message inside the message. She ran the signal's direction against the star map. It pointed toward a point in space 40 light-minutes away, empty as far as the Kethari charts showed. Nothing there. No station, no relay, no planet. She flagged it and went back to the data from the engagement. 4 minutes. 12 destroyers, and the human ship had disassembled the formation in 4 minutes without taking critical damage itself. Suri had been in the Dominion's Fleet Analysis Division for 9 years. She had reviewed thousands of engagements. She had watched the Cathari defeat enemies twice their size, 3 times their technology. She knew what a good fighter looked like. She had never seen anything move like the Resolute. It was not just speed. Speed was simple. You either had the drive output or you didn't. What the human ship had done was something more difficult. It had managed timing. Every maneuver had solved 2 problems at once, avoiding the current threat while positioning against the next one, as if whoever was making those decisions could see 3 moves ahead in every direction simultaneously. Suri began searching the human records again. The galactic database was thin, frustratingly thin, but she found fragments. References in old Velori trade documents to a species that had spent most of its history fighting itself. Not small conflicts. Civilization-scale wars, fought with weapons capable of destroying cities, repeated across centuries. She found a population estimate from 200 years ago, 8 billion humans on one planet. She found a more recent survey estimate, 40 billion, spread across dozens of settled worlds. They had survived their own wars and then expanded anyway, quickly, quietly. A species that had almost destroyed itself multiple times and was still here, still building, still spreading. That species had not stumbled into advanced combat doctrine by accident. Every tactic the Resolute had used in those 4 minutes existed because, somewhere in human history, someone had died learning why the wrong tactic failed. Suri wrote 2 words at the top of her notes: "Do not underestimate." She looked up and saw Rodden standing in the center of the command deck, issuing orders. He was sending 60 ships. "Admiral," she said. "Not now, Suri." "Sir, the secondary transmission." 60 ships will end this," he said. "One lucky engagement does not rewrite how war works." She stopped. She had learned in 9 years that there were moments when the correct action was to sit back down and update your notes and let events play out, because the alternative was to be relieved of your post and sent home, and a dead analyst helped no one. She sat back down. She wrote 60 ships deploying, secondary signal unresolved, possible reinforcement nearby, recommend abort, recommendation not submitted. Then she watched. The 60 Cathari ships moved out in a wide formation, a net, the standard doctrine for overwhelming a single vessel. Box it, remove its angles, make the math impossible. It had worked on every species that had ever tried to fight back. Oran Dast saw them coming and did something unexpected. He called the admiral again. "You're sending 60 ships," he said. "I counted. I want to ask you something, Admiral, not as a provocation but as a genuine question. Have you ever fought a species that practices war the way your fleet practices formation drills, continuously, obsessively, as a cultural institution?" Rodden did not answer. "We have a word for what we are," Dast continued. "Stubborn. It is not always considered a compliment, but it means something specific. We do not stop because the situation looks bad. We stop when the job is done, or we don't stop at all." A pause. "I am giving you one more opportunity to stand your fleet down. After this, the conversation changes." Rodden cut the channel. The 60 ships reached engagement range. What happened next lasted 19 minutes and would be reviewed by Cathari analysts for years afterward, each one trying to find the moment where a different decision would have changed the outcome. The Resolute fought differently against 60 than it had against 12. Against 12, it had been aggressive, cutting through the formation, targeting specific ships. Against 60, it became something else. Evasive in a way that looked almost passive until you tracked the pattern. It was pulling ships out of formation, using their own fire against each other, forcing the net to collapse inward until the outer ships were shooting through their own allies to reach it. Nira Sabal had stopped announcing targets. She was simply working. Her hands moved with the focus of someone who had trained for this so long that the training and the doing had become the same thing. 7 Cathari ships destroyed, 11 mission killed, 9 more with serious damage pulling back. The Resolute was still there, hull breaches on 2 decks, 1 weapon system offline, forward shields at 40%. Still there. Rodden looked at the numbers. In the entire history of the Cathari Dominion, no single enemy vessel had ever inflicted that level of damage on a fleet this size. Sir, Suri's voice was very quiet. The secondary transmission, I traced its direction. It leads to a point 40 light minutes out. She brought up the screen. I just picked up drive signatures there, multiple contacts, coming out of FTL. Rodden looked at the screen. The contacts were resolving into shapes. Ships. Human ships. 40 of them, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in a tight formation that was already, before they had even finished decelerating, spreading into a combat configuration. They had been waiting, close enough to respond, far enough that the Cathari sensors would not have found them unless they were looking. The Resolute had not come alone. The Resolute had been the question. The fleet was the answer. They conquered worlds with ease, until a human warship appeared. 40 human warships finished their deceleration burn, and the formation did not drift. That was the first thing Suri noticed. Coming out of faster-than-light travel, ships always drifted, small variances in exit velocity, minor gravitational pulls, the simple difficulty of 40 separate vessels executing a coordinated jump. Every species did it. The Cathari had spent years training to tighten their own exit formations, and they were considered the best in the Dominion fleet. These ships did not drift. They came out of FTL as a single unit and spread into combat configurations simultaneously, as if each captain had looked at every other captain's screen at the exact same moment and made the same decision. Yavel stared at his display. How are they doing that? Suri did not answer because she was busy reading a fragment she had found buried in a 40-year-old Velori contact report. A line about human communication systems, about a ship-to-ship data network the Velori had observed during a brief engagement. A system where every vessel shared its sensor data with every other vessel in real time, so that any ship in the fleet could fire at a target another ship had eyes on. They fought as a single organism, not one commander giving orders that filtered down through ranks. A live network, shared vision, each ship knowing everything all the others knew all at once. The Cathari did not have this. They had never needed it. Their enemies had always fallen apart under pressure, communications scrambled, formations broke, captains made individual decisions that conflicted with their neighbors. Divide was the first principle of Dominion tactics. You could not divide something that was already fused together. Admiral Petravane's voice came across on an open channel. Every Cathari ship in the system received it. I am Admiral Petravane of the United Earth Fleet. I am addressing the commander of the Cathari force in this system. The civilian population of Tesvan will now be evacuated under the protection of this fleet. Your vessels will hold position and will not interfere with evacuation operations. When the civilians are clear, you will withdraw from this system entirely. I am not interested in negotiation. I am not here to discuss terms. I am here to tell you what is going to happen. A pause. If you engage this fleet, we will finish the engagement before your reinforcements can reach you. I want to be precise about that. It is not a threat designed to intimidate. It is an accurate description of the tactical situation as I see it. I have 200 years of human military doctrine behind every ship in this formation, and I have a crew on the Resolute that just spent 20 minutes teaching 60 of your vessels a lesson they will not forget. Another pause, shorter. Think carefully, Admiral. Make the right decision. The channel closed. Rodden did not make the right decision. He had not survived 240 years of Dominion expansion by backing down from odds he still calculated were in his favor. 200 ships against 41. He still had the numbers. Numbers had always been enough. He ordered the attack. What followed was unlike anything the Cathari had experienced in their history of conquest. Not because the humans were unstoppable, they were not. 3 human ships were destroyed in the first exchange. 5 more took damage bad enough to pull them partially out of the line. Humans died. The communication logs from the engagement, reviewed later, showed human crew members calling out casualties, rerouting power through damaged systems, doing repairs mid-combat that Cathari doctrine considered impossible under fire. They did not stop. That was the thing that the Cathari could not process. Every other species, when damaged, made the calculation that survival was more important than the objective. They retreated or surrendered or broke formation to protect themselves. The humans became more dangerous when hurt. A Cathari cruiser forced a human vessel into a point-blank exchange and destroyed one of its engine banks. The human ship, now slower, turned into the cruiser and rammed it at an angle calculated to shear off the Cathari vessel's primary weapon array. The cruiser survived. Its weapons did not. The human ship limped backward and kept firing with what it had left. The Cathari formation began to come apart. Not because any one engagement was decisive, but because the human tactical network meant that every weakness in the Cathari formation was visible to every human ship simultaneously. Gaps were exploited the moment they appeared. Flanking moves were answered before they developed. When a Cathari commander improvised, tried something outside standard doctrine, the human fleet adapted inside the time it took to complete the maneuver. Rodden ordered a partial retreat. Not a full withdrawal, he could not stomach that, not yet, but a pullback to regroup, to create distance, to stop the bleeding. The humans let them go. They did not pursue. That was deliberate, Surrey knew. They could have chased. They chose not to. They were making a specific point. We are not trying to destroy you. We are trying to stop you. There is a difference. On Tesven's surface, people had stopped running. They stood in streets and fields and watched the light show in the sky, human ships moving in patterns that looked, from the ground, almost like something a careful mind had choreographed. A Tesven elder watched through an observatory telescope and saw a damaged human ship fire across the bow of a retreating Cathari cruiser, not to destroy it, but to turn it, to move it away from the planet. They were protecting a world they had never visited, for a species they had never met, because someone had sent a signal into the dark, and the humans had decided the signal was worth answering. The elder, whose name was Bessa, turned to the young astronomer beside her and said, in a voice that was not quite steady, "Who are these people?" The astronomer had no answer. Above them, the Resolute held its position near the planet, hull scorched, one weapon array dark, forward shields barely functional, and did not leave. It would not leave until everyone on that surface was safe. That much was clear. They conquered worlds with ease, until a human warship appeared. 3 weeks after the battle, a neutral trading station called Vareth Point agreed to host a meeting. It was not a peace summit. Neither side called it that. It was 2 commanders in a room with a table between them, which was already more than most species had ever managed with the Cathari Dominion. Rodden arrived first. He sat without speaking and looked at the room, small, functional, the kind of place built for merchants settling disputes over cargo weights, not for the aftermath of battles. He had read Surrey's full report 3 times on the journey here. He had a habit, when he found information troubling, of reading it again to find the error. There was no error. The document detailed in careful language what humans were. They had emerged from a single planet, unremarkable in size, unremarkable in position. They had developed intelligence and immediately used it to fight each other. For thousands of years. Over land, water, ideology, religion, trade, fear. They had invented weapons capable of ending their own civilization, and had then spent several centuries not using them, which Surrey described as, in her clinical analyst's language, one of the most statistically improbable achievements in recorded galactic history. They had colonized their solar system while still carrying the psychology of a species that had never fully stopped preparing for war. They had expanded to other stars the same way. Every colony was self-sufficient. Every population was trained. Their military doctrine had not been invented by generals. It had been built over millennia of ordinary people surviving extraordinary violence and passing down what they learned. They did not fight because they wanted to conquer. They fought because they had learned, at great cost, that not fighting did not make the threat go away. Rodden was still reading the last page when Petra Vane arrived. She sat across from him without ceremony. No guards, though he knew there were humans positioned outside the room. She set nothing on the table. She just looked at him, waiting. He said, "You lost people in that engagement. 11 in the first contact, 23 more during the main battle." Her voice did not change when she said it. 34 names, I know all of them. You consider that a victory? I consider that a cost, she said. We don't celebrate engagements. We review them. We find what went wrong and we fix it and we make sure the next time goes better. She paused. We've been doing that for a long time. Rodden put the report on the table. Your analyst, the number she cited, 8 billion humans 200 years ago, 40 billion now. Yes. And before the space age. Your own records show population collapses, wars that killed hundreds of millions. Yes. And you continued. Petra looked at him steadily. What would you have had us do? He did not have an answer. He had not expected to not have an answer. The Cathari model of civilization was built on the principle that strength prevented suffering, that if you were powerful enough, nothing could threaten you. It was a clean logic. He had believed in it for 60 years. He was beginning to understand that it was also a logic that had never been tested by something willing to absorb the worst it could offer and come back the next day. What do you want? He asked. Petra said, the same thing we've always wanted, to be left alone. The difference is we are no longer willing to simply hope for it. She folded her hands on the table. The civilizations you have absorbed, the Marathi, the Pelosi, the Venari, the Tesven that you were about to add to that list, they are not going to be rebuilt. We both understand that. But there are others still out there, still small, still quiet, still under no one's protection. And you intend to be their protection. We intend to make clear that the cost of conquest has changed, she said. You can factor that into your calculations however you choose. It was not a treaty. It was not an alliance. It was, simply, the truth about what humanity intended, spoken plainly to the person who needed to hear it most. Rodden sat with it for a moment. Then he picked up the report and said, Your analyst, Surrey. Petra raised an eyebrow slightly. Her files on your species, he said, the ones she submitted to my command, they were thorough. He paused. She recommended I abort the initial operation. Did she? I did not listen. He set the report down. She has asked to be transferred to the Outer Research Division. She wants to study your species full-time. Petra said nothing. I approved it, Rodden said. Not with warmth. He was not a warm man, but with the particular tone of someone giving credit where it was due and finding the act less difficult than expected. They did not shake hands. That was a human custom, and Rodden was not human. They stood, and he inclined his head, and she returned the gesture, and they walked out of the room in different directions with no promises made and no documents signed. On the Resolute, docked at Vareth Point, Oran Dast sat in the mess and ate a meal with 4 of his senior crew. Nobody talked about the battle. They talked about what Tesven food might taste like, since a Tesven delegation had sent over a case of preserved goods as a gesture of thanks. The case sat unopened on the table. Nira Sabal picked up one of the containers and looked at it. Could be anything, she said. Could be terrible, said the engineer beside her. Could be great, said Dast. He reached over and opened it. The smell was strange, sharp and sweet at the same time, like something fermented and floral. Not familiar, not unpleasant. He tried it first. That was his way, take the risk before asking anyone else to. He chewed slowly, thought about it. Not bad, he said. Not bad. For 34 names on a wall. For a planet still standing. For a fleet that had shown up because a signal came out of the dark and someone decided it was worth answering. Not bad at all.